In 2002, Ford made a promise that would send shockwaves through the automotive world. They were going to resurrect one of the most legendary race cars ever built, a machine that had humiliated Ferrari on the world's biggest stage 4 years in a row. What emerged would become one of the most sought-after American supercars ever produced, a vehicle that would make early buyers rich beyond their expectations and leave Ford questioning whether they'd made a terrible mistake. The 2006 Ford GT isn't just a car. It's a revenge story, a financial disaster, and an investment phenomenon all wrapped into one stunning package. And the full story behind it is far more dramatic than most people realize. The roots of the Ford GT trace back to one of the most bitter rivalries in automotive history. In 1963, Henry Ford II had a plan. Ferrari was struggling financially, and Ford saw an opportunity to buy the Italian automaker for around $10 million. Negotiations dragged on for months. Lawyers flew back and forth between Detroit and Maranello. Then, at the last possible moment, Enzo Ferrari walked away from the deal. Some say he used Ford's offer simply to drive up his price with Fiat. Others claim he couldn't stomach the idea of Americans controlling his racing program. Whatever the reason, Henry Ford II took it personally. Very personally. According to company legend, he gave his racing division a simple directive: beat Ferrari at Le Mans and make them regret ever embarrassing Ford. What followed was one of the most expensive and aggressive motorsport campaigns ever undertaken. Ford poured millions into the GT40 program, eventually bringing in Carroll Shelby to fix what had become an embarrassing failure. The car kept breaking down. Drivers complained about the heat. Ferrari kept winning. Then everything changed in 1966. Ford showed up at Le Mans with a fleet of GT40s and proceeded to finish first, second, and third. The photo finish was staged for maximum humiliation. Ford wanted the world to see 3 of their cars crossing the line together while Ferrari watched from the sidelines. That victory would be repeated 3 more times, cementing the GT40 as one of the most dominant race cars ever built. And that legacy is exactly what Ford wanted to tap into 4 decades later. The story of how the 2006 GT came to exist reads like a corporate fairy tale. In the early 2000s, Ford was approaching its centennial celebration. The company needed something special, something that would remind the world what the Blue Oval was capable of producing. Enter Camillo Pardo and a small team of designers working in a secretive studio called the Living Legends program. Their job was to create concept cars that paid tribute to Ford's greatest hits. The GT40 Tribute was never supposed to be more than a show car. When Ford unveiled the GT40 concept at the 2002 Detroit Auto Show, executives made it clear this was just for display. There were no production plans, no factory preparations, no business case whatsoever. Then something unexpected happened. The public response was overwhelming. People weren't just interested. They were demanding Ford build the thing. Deposit checks started arriving at dealerships for a car that didn't exist. Automotive journalists wrote passionate editorials begging Ford to make it happen. The pressure became impossible to ignore. Ford reversed course and announced limited production would begin. There was just one problem. They had to change the name. A British company called Saphir GT40 Spares owned the trademark to GT40, and they weren't giving it up without a fight. Ford's lawyers eventually decided it wasn't worth the battle. The car would simply be called the GT. Some enthusiasts still argue this was a missed opportunity. Others say it helped distinguish the modern car from its ancestor. Either way, production was officially happening. And Ford had no idea what they were getting themselves into. The engineering behind the 2006 GT was ambitious by any standard. Ford decided to build a genuine supercar, not just a retro-styled cruiser. At the heart of the machine sat a 5.4-liter supercharged V8 engine producing 550 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. That supercharger wasn't some off-the-shelf component. It was a Lischolm twin-screw unit that delivered power with almost no lag. The engine architecture shared DNA with Ford's Lightning pickup truck, but nearly every component was upgraded for the GT application. Performance numbers were staggering for 2005. 0 to 60 came in just 3.3 seconds. Top speed exceeded 205 miles per hour. These weren't marketing claims. Independent testers verified them repeatedly. The chassis utilized an aluminum space frame with carbon fiber and composite body panels, keeping weight under 3,500 pounds despite the car's substantial dimensions. The suspension setup borrowed concepts from the original GT40, with a mid-engine layout that placed the driver ahead of the rear axle for optimal weight distribution. Ford partnered with Ricardo for the 6-speed manual transmission, and here's something that matters to enthusiasts: they never offered an automatic option. Period. If you wanted a GT, you had to row your own gears. Brembo supplied the massive brake package with 14-inch rotors. BBS forged the aluminum wheels. McPherson struts handled the front suspension while unequal-length control arms managed the rear. Every component was selected for performance, not cost savings. Ford reportedly tested prototype GTs at the Nürburgring in Germany, though they did so quietly to avoid tipping off competitors. The final product stood just 43.5 inches tall, remarkably close to the original GT40's 40-inch roofline that gave the car its name. But getting all this engineering into production would prove far more challenging than anyone anticipated. Production of the Ford GT became a nightmare almost immediately. Ford contracted with Saleen, the California-based tuning company, to handle assembly at a facility in Troy, Michigan. The plan seemed reasonable. Saleen had experience building low-volume performance vehicles, and their operation could handle the specialized manufacturing processes the GT required. Reality proved messy. Quality control issues emerged from the first batches. Early cars suffered from paint problems that would haunt the model throughout its production run. Owners complained about orange peel texture, inconsistent color matching between panels, and clear coat failures. These weren't cheap econoboxes. People were paying nearly $150,000 and expected perfection. They weren't getting it. Supercharger failures plagued some early units. The sophisticated Lischolm units were powerful but demanding, and improper assembly led to premature breakdowns. Ford issued multiple technical service bulletins addressing various concerns. Fuel tank problems eventually triggered recalls. The company found itself in the awkward position of defending a halo car that was giving owners genuine headaches. Ford eventually took more direct control over the production process, but the damage to the car's reputation was done. Online forums filled with horror stories from frustrated owners who'd waited months or years for their dream car only to spend weeks at the dealer addressing warranty claims. What's remarkable is how this affected long-term perception. Despite the early problems, GT owners remained fiercely loyal. Many acknowledged the issues but insisted the driving experience made everything worthwhile. The cars that survived the break-in period often proved remarkably reliable. But that first-year reputation would become part of the GT's complicated legacy. Ford knew some buyers wanted something even more special than a standard GT. The Heritage Edition answered that demand in spectacular fashion. Released exclusively for 2006, this variant paid direct tribute to the Gulf Oil racing livery that made the original GT40 famous. The iconic blue and orange color scheme wasn't just a stripe package, it was a rolling piece of motorsport history. Ford produced only 343 Heritage Edition GTs, making them instantly collectible. Each car received a numbered plaque commemorating its place in the limited run. The visual impact was undeniable. These cars stood out even among other GTs, which were already attention magnets by any standard. Beyond the Heritage Edition, persistent rumors have circulated about other special builds. Some collectors claim Ford assembled additional units for executives and VIPs that never appeared in official production numbers. The 4 original concept cars from the auto show have become objects of fascination. Their current locations are debated among the most dedicated enthusiasts. Prototype and pre-production vehicles occasionally surface at major auctions, commanding premiums far beyond standard examples. Authenticating these cars has become a cottage industry, with specialists examining VINs, build sheets, and historical documentation to verify claims. The scarcity of Heritage Editions and special variants has pushed their values into territory that would have seemed absurd when the cars were new. But then again, everything about the GT's market trajectory has defied expectations. The question that still puzzles automotive historians is simple: Why did Ford kill the GT after just 2 model years? The official company line was always that limited production was part of the plan. The GT was meant to be exclusive, a celebration rather than a permanent model line. Building too many would dilute the specialness. That explanation never satisfied skeptics. Behind the scenes, the math told a different story. The GT's base price started at $139,995 for 2005, rising to $149,995 for the 2006 model year. Those figures sound profitable until you consider what Ford actually spent. Industry analysts estimated that genuine production costs exceeded $200,000 per vehicle. Every GT that rolled off the line represented a loss. Ford could absorb those losses when times were good. Times weren't good. The mid-2000s found Ford hemorrhaging cash. The company's North American operations were struggling against Japanese competitors. Pension obligations were crushing the balance sheet. Something had to give. When Alan Mulally arrived as CEO in 2006, he brought a laser focus on cost reduction and survival. The GT didn't fit that strategy. Building a money-losing supercar might boost brand image, but it wouldn't save the company from bankruptcy. Some insiders claim the GT program was always understood as a marketing exercise. The halo effect would lift Ford's entire lineup, justifying the losses on paper. Others argue that Ford genuinely hoped to make the GT profitable but couldn't solve the manufacturing cost puzzle. Whatever the truth, production ended with 4,038 total units built across all model years. Ford announced no successor, no continuation, nothing. The GT simply disappeared from the lineup. And then something unexpected happened to the cars already on the road. From the moment the GT went on sale, dealers played games that infuriated customers. Ford had produced something genuinely desirable, and dealerships weren't about to leave money on the table. Massive markups became standard practice almost immediately. The official MSRP meant nothing at most lots. Early buyers reported paying $50,000 over sticker. Some paid $100,000 extra. A few desperate collectors allegedly handed over $250,000 or more just to secure an example. Ford attempted to control allocations, assigning cars to specific dealerships based on various criteria. The system was supposed to ensure fair distribution. In practice, it created a secondary market for dealer allocations. Connections mattered more than cash. Stories circulated about buyers who waited years on official lists while celebrities and executives jumped to the front. If you knew someone at Ford, your wait time shortened considerably. If you were just a regular enthusiast with money, good luck. The dealer markup situation became so notorious that it shaped how Ford handled the next-generation GT's sales process decades later. They'd learned their lesson, though some argue the replacement system created its own controversies. For buyers in 2005 and 2006, the experience ranged from seamless to maddening depending entirely on which dealer they approached. And for those who did secure cars, the rewards would prove substantial. They just didn't know it yet. Ford never officially campaigned the 2006 GT in professional motorsport, which struck many enthusiasts as a missed opportunity. Here was a car literally named after a 4-time Le Mans champion, and the factory wasn't taking it racing. That void was filled by privateer teams who saw potential. Mattek Competition developed both GT3 and GT1 variants of the Ford GT, transforming road cars into serious racing machines. These weren't casual track day builds. They were full competition vehicles with roll cages, stripped interiors, and significantly upgraded powertrains. Robertson Racing campaigned Ford GTs at Le Mans itself, bringing the nameplate back to the race that made it famous. The results weren't GT40 level dominant, but seeing modern GTs compete at the Circuit de la Sarthe meant something to enthusiasts who remembered the original rivalry with Ferrari. Meanwhile, the aftermarket exploded with tuning options. Hennessy Performance offered packages pushing output beyond 1,000 horsepower. Twin-turbo conversions became popular among owners willing to sacrifice warranty coverage for speed. The stock GT was quick, but the modified versions were genuinely terrifying. Ford Racing offered an official track day package with suspension upgrades and other go-fast goodies for owners who wanted factory-approved performance enhancements. These cars saw regular use at track events, proving the GT wasn't just a garage queen despite its escalating values. The accessibility of modifications actually helped sustain community interest long after production ended. Owners continue building and racing their GTs today, keeping the mechanical spirit of the program alive. Not everything about the Ford GT story is inspiring. The car attracted its share of controversies and legal complications that most promotional materials conveniently ignore. The trademark dispute with Saphir GT40 spares was just the beginning. Some early owners pursued lemon law remedies after repeated quality failures exhausted their patience. Online discussions about class action possibilities over the paint problems never materialized into formal litigation, but they reflected genuine frustration within the ownership community. More troubling allegations surfaced regarding VIN tampering on certain units. The collector car market attracts unsavory characters, and a vehicle as valuable as the GT presented tempting opportunities for fraud. Authentication became increasingly important as prices climbed. Counterfeit parts flooded the aftermarket, creating headaches for owners seeking genuine replacements. Ford's limited production run meant parts supplies were always constrained, and unscrupulous suppliers exploited that scarcity. Insurance companies initially treated the GT with suspicion. The car's combination of extreme performance and high value made it the theft target. Some owners reported difficulty obtaining coverage at reasonable rates. Several high-profile crashes involved GT owners who exceeded their driving abilities. The car's raw power and limited electronic intervention demanded respect. At least 2 documented fatalities involved Ford GT accidents, though specific circumstances varied. These darker aspects rarely appear in enthusiast media celebrating the car. They're part of the complete picture nonetheless. The Ford GT's transformation from depreciating asset to investment vehicle has stunned even optimistic early predictions. When production ended in 2006, conventional wisdom suggested the cars would follow typical exotic trajectories. Initial drops, gradual stabilization, eventual modest appreciation. Nothing about the GT's market performance has been conventional. Standard examples that sold for around $150,000 new now command $400,000 to $500,000 depending on mileage and condition. That's not a typo. Heritage editions have pushed even higher, with exceptional examples approaching $800,000 at major auctions. Low-mileage cars in preservation condition have crossed $700,000. Bring a Trailer has become the primary marketplace for GT transactions, with the platform's transparent bidding process establishing clear market benchmarks. Collectors are hoarding inventory, tightening supply precisely when demand keeps climbing. The car has appreciated faster than most comparable supercars from its era. Ferrari F430s from the same period can't match the GT's percentage gains. Porsche Carrera GTs have done better, but those cost 3 times as much when new. Some market analysts predict million-dollar Ford GTs within the next decade. That projection sounded insane 5 years ago. Now it seems increasingly plausible. Original buyers who kept their cars have seen returns that dwarf conventional investments. A $150,000 purchase in 2005 is now worth 3 to 4 times the original outlay. The GT has become a case study in automotive speculation, though nobody planned it that way. When Ford announced a new GT in 2015, reactions from 2006 GT owners were decidedly mixed. The new car was revolutionary, a carbon fiber monocoque, active aerodynamics, and a twin-turbocharged V6 EcoBoost engine producing 647 horsepower. It was lighter, faster, and more technologically advanced than the original in every measurable way. And many enthusiasts hated it. The V6 engine became the primary flashpoint. The original GT's supercharged V8 delivered an emotional experience that spreadsheet metrics couldn't capture. That engine sounded aggressive and felt brutal. The EcoBoost V6, whatever its performance advantages, couldn't replicate that character. Ford's application process for buying the new GT generated additional controversy. Prospective buyers had to submit detailed applications explaining why they deserved the privilege of spending $450,000 on a Ford. The company would then select purchasers based on criteria that seemed arbitrary to many applicants. Even worse were the resale restrictions. Ford required buyers to sign agreements promising not to flip their cars for a specified period. When John Cena sold his new GT before the restriction window closed, Ford sued him. The spectacle of an automaker taking legal action against a customer for reselling a car they'd purchased struck many as absurd. These controversies actually benefited 2006 GT values. The drama surrounding the new car reminded enthusiasts why they preferred the original. The 2006 GT felt more honest, more analog, more authentically connected to the GT40 legacy. Market prices responded accordingly, climbing even as the new GT struggled with its own reputation issues. The Ford GT attracted an impressive roster of celebrity owners, and their experiences helped shape public perception of the car. Jay Leno has been the most vocal advocate, featuring his GT in multiple episodes of Jay Leno's Garage and consistently praising its driving dynamics. His enthusiasm carried weight. Leno's collection includes virtually every significant supercar ever built, and he chooses to drive the GT regularly. Jeremy Clarkson featured the Ford GT on Top Gear multiple times, delivering characteristic enthusiasm mixed with British skepticism. His famous assessment that the GT was an event every time you drove it captured something essential about the ownership experience. These weren't sterile, clinical supercars. They demanded attention and delivered drama. Kid Rock owned a GT, which became somewhat controversial given his polarizing public persona. Various NFL and NBA players purchased examples, attracted by the combination of American heritage and exotic performance. The GT appeared in major video game franchises including Forza Motorsport, Gran Turismo, and Need for Speed, introducing younger audiences to the car's appeal. The 2019 film, Ford v Ferrari, renewed interest in the GT40 racing story, and marketing materials prominently featured the modern GT as a spiritual successor. YouTube content creators have documented ownership experiences extensively, creating a video archive of what daily life with a GT actually involves. The ownership community remains remarkably tight-knit and protective. Forums and social media groups maintain active discussion threads. Annual gatherings attract hundreds of cars. Owners share technical knowledge freely, knowing their vehicle's long-term survival depends on collective expertise. Owning a Ford GT in 2024 bears little resemblance to owning one in 2006. The cars have aged, parts have become scarce, and specialized knowledge is increasingly essential. Annual maintenance costs for a driven GT average between $5,000 and $10,000 assuming nothing breaks. Major services can exceed $20,000. If something significant fails, owners face bills that would make most sports car enthusiasts faint. Supercharger rebuilds typically cost $8,000 to $12,000 at qualified shops. Clutch replacements are notoriously expensive due to the labor required to access the components. The Ricardo transmission is generally reliable but expensive to address when problems emerge. Ford no longer officially supports the model. Factory parts availability has diminished to the point where some owners stockpile components against future needs. Specialist shops that understand the GT's quirks charge premium rates reflecting their expertise. The alternative, taking your GT to a regular mechanic, typically ends badly. Many owners report that properly maintained GTs prove surprisingly reliable. The cars aren't delicate when treated correctly. However, neglect accelerates deterioration rapidly. Storage conditions matter enormously. Climate control prevents the paint issues that plagued early cars from worsening. Proper fluid maintenance prevents the cascade failures that catch negligent owners by surprise. Insurance costs range dramatically based on coverage levels and usage patterns. Show car policies run a few thousand annually. Full coverage for driven vehicles can exceed $10,000. Some insurers still won't touch the GT at any price, though that's become less common as the market has matured. The 2006 Ford GT represents something that no longer exists in the modern automotive landscape. This was the last truly analog supercar Ford will likely ever build. There's no traction control intervening between your right foot and the rear tires. No stability management system correcting your mistakes. No launch control optimizing your acceleration runs. Just a driver, a machine, and the consequences of whatever happens when they interact. That rawness terrifies some and thrills others. The GT demands respect in ways that contemporary supercars simply don't. Modern electronics have made absurd performance accessible to average drivers. The GT requires skill, attention, and a healthy appreciation for physics. Make a mistake in a current Corvette and computers save you. Make the same mistake in a GT and you'd better hope your insurance is paid up. This characteristic has become increasingly valuable as manufacturers prioritize safety and accessibility over driving engagement. The GT offers an experience you literally cannot replicate in a new vehicle at any price. Ferrari won't sell you something this unfiltered. McLaren won't either. The analog supercar has been regulated and liability lawyered out of existence. Except for these 4,038 Ford GTs still roaming roads and racetracks and occasionally garage floors worldwide. The car proved American manufacturers could compete with European exotics on their own terms. Before the GT, serious collectors dismissed domestic supercars as pretenders. The GT changed that perception permanently. Its influence echoes through Ford's current GT program and the broader American supercar market. Chevrolet's mid-engine Corvette exists partly because the GT demonstrated appetite for domestically produced exotics. The 2006 Ford GT story contains lessons about corporate revenge, engineering ambition, production hubris, and accidental investment genius. A car born from Henry Ford II's wounded pride became a rolling tribute to what America could achieve when pride demanded results. The manufacturing struggles proved that building supercars requires expertise that can't be rushed or improvised. The market trajectory demonstrated that passion and scarcity sometimes matter more than specifications and practicality. Values will likely continue climbing as the collector car market matures and these vehicles become increasingly rare. The original buyers are aging. Some will pass their cars to heirs who may not share their enthusiasm. Others will sell to collectors who see the GT as investment vehicles rather than driving machines. Either way, the supply isn't growing and the demand shows no signs of diminishing. What happens to these cars over the coming decades will determine whether the GT joins automotive's immortal ranks or fades into obscurity. The smart money says immortality. There are simply too few cars, too much history, and too many people who remember what the GT meant when it arrived. The 2006 Ford GT might be Ford's last mid-engine V8 supercar ever produced. The new GT uses a V6. Future Fords will likely be electric or hybrid. The analog, naturally aspirated, supercharged, manual transmission American supercar may have reached its evolutionary endpoint in a Michigan factory nearly 20 years ago. That makes each surviving example something more than just a car. They're artifacts from a moment that won't return, built by a company trying to honor its own mythology, purchased by enthusiasts who recognized something special even when the paint was flaking and the superchargers were failing. The GT wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was real.